Breaking Barriers.
My name is Gary Bontrager. I want to welcome you to an episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. I'm very excited to have a childhood hero with me today that I get to interview, and I'll just introduce Kenny Sanders from Dayton, Iowa. He was known for the Enforcer, the 666 International, and he had, I believe, 4 turbos on it. And we're going to get into that story, but you were larger than life when I was a kid. So what got you into tractor pulling?
If you talk to my kids, they say anything that had a motor on it, I've pulled or made or tried to pull or whatever. I've always been fascinated with motors and power. And as a kid, I souped up cars. I overhauled my first car when I was 13 years old and put bigger pistons and the stuff in that to soup it up. And I don't know, I've always worked on tractors. We probably started, I think maybe the first thing I had was a nitro burning Cub Cadet, single cylinder that we lifted the whole block apart on that. We found out we had to tie it all together with 3/4 inch ready rod to keep the cylinder and head on. We pulled the micro mini toy tractors all over the country. We pulled antiques. Took a Super C and bored it out and put Rambler pistons in it and stroked the crank, and it had 70 horse on the dyno and an F12. Had a 90 horse F20 and a 90 horse F30. We went all over pulling antiques, and in '85 I bought this. Originally the tractor belonged to the Steve Graham in southern Iowa, and it had been sitting for a couple years, and I bought it, gave too much for it, as everybody will tell you, but
you spent more on it though after that, didn't you?
I bought the tractor and it was in sad shape. But we took a year to rebuild it. We done virtually all the work on it ourselves. One of the kids that helped me actually worked in a machine shop, so he could polish with the crank in it was cracked. It had dropped the valve, and the valve had went through the head. When we got it, the input shaft was twisted in it. The differential carrier had an ear broke off on it.
Oh my goodness.
It was in sad shape. One of the turbos on it didn't even have the guts in it.
So it was a pulling tractor when you bought it?
It was a pulling tractor.
Okay.
They had pulled it a few years, and I actually seen it pull at Louisville when it broke in two in Louisville. That was the year they had 460s. I think they broke 3 460s, and this 666 broke the TA housing into it, Louisville.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah, and I broke it twice in two.
So when you broke it, did it completely
No, because
but you found it cracked and...
Well, I was probably one of the first ones to put tie bars on the side.
Right.
In fact, NTPA looked at my tie bars when I made them, because that following year is when Larry Lundry broke into it, Toma,
right,
with that 460. But I had tie bars on mine, and it'd break right behind the flywheel housing, and the tie bars would hold it together. The second time we broke it, we had been in Indiana to Shelbyville, Indiana, and I don't believe it broke there, but on the way home, I think jiggling on the trailer, because when it got to Waverly, Iowa, we drove straight back to pull at Waverly that night, and when I went to take off, I noticed the hoods moved about 2 inches, and I thought, this ain't good. But I kept my foot in her, and I made a decent pull. And when we got back to the pits, I said, it's broke. We looked, and she took the blanket off, and sure enough, it was broken too again.
Oh my goodness. So when you bought this tractor, did they start pulling it new, or?
Graham's bought that, and they said this is their story. They raked hay with it one day and then made a pulling tractor out of it. So.
And then how many turbos were on it when you bought it?
Well, it had 2 on it, but it only had 1 1/4.
And what weight class were you pulling back then?
5,500.
That's really low for that tractor.
Yes.
Because they're running 62, a lot of them are 6250, maybe 6500 if they're alcohol, and they're struggling to get the weight down on those tractors.
When I bought that tractor, they pull started it. They had no starter on it, no nothing. The one thing that I did buy decent, because they had that front end was all homemade and cobbled, and I did call Doug Drussel. In fact, I got the last front end that he built in Kansas, and I had him, I told him what I was going to do. I wanted to put a front mount starter on it, and he said, let's put a 36 volt airplane starter on it. So he made the mounts in that front end so we could go right off the front dampener on the, give me a dog to mount on the front dampener, and I had a 36 volt airplane starter on it, so it'd wing it right over to start.
Did you have batteries on the tractor, or you use a battery pack?
The first 2 years we carried a battery pack, and that was just a lot of work.
Right, right.
So the following year I put 3 little garden tractor batteries in it, and that's all it took to start it. So,
really?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. And so you started this in '85 is when you bought the tractor. You obviously went completely through it. Today we're using billet carriers in the rear ends. What were you doing back then?
I'll tell you what, when I bought it, it had the ear broke on the carrier.
Yep.
I just put another carrier in it. I took the kid that helped me worked in a machine shop down in Des Moines. We machined the inside of the carrier out, and the only thing we done was I had a 2+2 front carrier, and they have brass side pieces in them, and we machined the carrier out and we put them brass side pieces in it. And I was telling Ralph Banner about it once, and I never thought of that, he said, but I just took them from a 2+2 and put in there, and then we machined the cross down right in the crankshaft grinder. He machined the cross down, and we made our own needle bearings and had our own needle bearing cross.
So you needled it already back then?
Yeah, way back then, needled the cross. Somewhere out, I can't remember where it was out east, was when I broke the rear end housing itself, but that's when on the 666s, they have tapered axle bearings,
yes.
And we was building so much power that it pushed the bolts right out of the housing and
yes.
on the inside. So I made a full 3/8 ring, and then we tapped and we put 6 extra bolts in it, and then we never had any more trouble with the axles or the housing. So.
And you didn't take any weight off of the bull gears or anything?
Oh yeah, my bull gears weighed 18 pounds when we was done.
Okay, I was going to say I couldn't figure. You had to do something to shave weight.
That was and Von Bauer helped me a lot on that tractor back. He turned the bull gears for me, but yeah, they weighed 18 pounds. We had the housing all drilled out wherever we could.
And then the transmission. What were you using for a transmission at that time?
I had one gear, road gear. That's all I had.
So
nothing.
You just emptied out the...
I took everything out of her, and I ran road gear and reverse, and that's all I had in that tractor.
And that was not direct.
That was direct.
That was direct. You just went straight shaft and hooked it up. So.
And I could change my ratio. Actually, the 6s had 3 different ring and pinions, so you could change your wheel speed by changing the ring and pinions.
So as the years went on, you'd start to speed up the rear end.
Actually not, because as the years went on, people don't realize that the sleds pulled harder than they did back in the 80s. And nothing against Wessendorf like them sleds, but if you could spin the tires on the line, you could spin them all the way down, because a lot of times the weight box only went halfway up.
Right.
Where you take a Bauer sled, you better have your act together, because at the end that sled's going to hit you hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to take power.
Right.
So we tried a faster gear there for a year or two, and we went back to our original gear, but we could pull road gear just fine. So
I have a question on sleds. You talked about, because Bauer still probably builds as many sleds as anybody out there, and when you first went to those mechanical sleds, the approach for the box was at an angle up, right?
Yeah.
Towards the back of the tractor, where now they're level, And when the pan drops, you're actually angled down.
And all the weight's on the pan.
Yeah. And
you
I
can
know,
walk back and spin the back wheel on the sled.
Yeah. And I know the first time I made a pass, about halfway down the track, I thought they'll never stop me.
Yeah.
But boy, they'll bring you to your knees in a hurry.
Yes, sir. You better have your stuff together at the end.
When that pan drops, that's when the work starts. It'll separate quickly. So you shaved a ton of weight then in the rear end, because to get down to 5,500, the motor was it was based off the 400 series International, but it just had was a 360, right?
I ran 360.
Yeah.
I took the 766 crank and pistons and put in the 666 motor to give you 360 cubic inch.
And so then what did you do? What rods and things did you run there?
I actually used the 400 series rods, but we had to machine the top with the hand grinder to get them to fit in the pistons. And then on the bottom, everybody will laugh, but nobody can understand how they lasted, but I ground the rod completely off on the bottom to lighten the rods up. I always said, hey, I don't need the rod on the bottom, I need it pushing down.
Right.
So I ground the rods completely off. I still got my gram scale around here where we balanced our own rods and our own pistons. And
because I've heard of guys taking 414 rods or 400 series rods and putting them in there, and then they would have to slide the piston down to get the wrist pin in, is how I was told they did it. But you shaved your rods down enough to where you could drop them in there.
The rod, I never had any trouble with that.
You didn't have any trouble with the rods, okay.
But we just lightened the devil out of them.
Right.
So.
And they held up just fine. You just balanced them that way.
Balanced our own rods and pistons.
Excellent.
Got my own gram scale. And
then what about the crank? Did you guys balance the crank at all back in that day?
No. What we did was, that motor's probably got the worst balanced crankshaft in the world.
Okay.
According to Terry Blackburn, Brent Long, Ernie Connors, they take and weld the center. There's no counterweights in the center on that crankshaft.
Okay.
And now what we done is we just took and, like Terry Blackburn said, can he just weld anything on it that's better than what you got? And that's what we did, because otherwise 8 passes we'd wipe out the center main bearings. We could pull the pan off that and just put in the 3 center main bearings, and that was all was wore in that engine. But you would completely wear the 3 center main bearings out in 8 passes.
Oh my goodness.
So we just started welding junk on the crank and kind of balanced ourselves, and we really helped because we didn't wipe the mains out so often then.
So you were using stock block, which is pretty common, but at that point in time, you were still using no roller lifters. Did you have roller lifters?
Yeah.
You did have,
yeah.
Okay. Because I know now in the 400 series, they're using truck blocks a lot. And then they'll use, because those have roller lifters and it's easier to...
We bored the block and put truck lifters in.
You did, okay.
Yeah, and I did have a set of I bought a set of used hyper rollers from rockers from I'm getting forgetful. Rob Russell.
Okay.
At the time, he'd bought a different set and I bought them. I did have hardened push rods. But like the front cover for holding the timing gears, we've done all that machining ourselves.
So back to the valve train though, you just used a stock valve cover, and the valves you used were just
stock valves, but I used Chevrolet valve springs. I used triple valve springs on it, and I used hyper rocker stock valves. I had found a turbocharged head off of an S9 payloader.
Okay.
So I ran a turbocharged head rather than an aspirated head.
And then did you do anything as far as any porting? Nothing like that?
That was a really good flowing head the way it was. So
as long as you could push air through it, you just added more
turbos.
Add more turbos.
Had a little more air to it. So.
Okay. So just to change now, we've got billet valve covers in 3 pieces, and I can slide my top pieces of the valve cover off, and I can run the overheads in about 45 minutes. And I don't need to pull turbos or anything to do it. So it's changed a little. So then your front cover, you were saying, what'd you do there?
Well, what do you got holding your idler gear?
On the front side, it's a billet.
Oh, here's all billet.
Aluminum billet front end.
Well,
I think everybody's pretty well doing that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't have the time or the money, or I don't even know if anybody was making one back then.
You know, they mass produce them now. These guys, they're pretty readily available. That's really not the expensive part.
We cut the whole water pump assembly off, and then
the turbos and the fuel pumps are where they start to get you now. A lot of these other parts are so readily available. Really, they're not probably any more expensive than if you went and bought a brand new one out of a dealership.
You know, everybody runs headers. I ran a turbocharged manifold off of an S9 payloader. It wasn't a natural aspirated manifold, but now they all run headers. And
yeah, they do a lot of different things. Everybody. The big thing now is intake manifolds too. What did you do on an intake?
Well, with 2 turbos we was fine. 3 turbos. We drove clear to Louisiana to pull where they had the Freedom Bowl.
Right.
And at about 100 feet, I blew the manifold off of it. I actually had it bolt. Hyper said you could drill through them and put a bolt clear through them and hold them together. See? Well, guess what? It just blew it all to hell. It blew it off.
What'd you drill through?
On where the manifold bolts up, I drilled down through and put 2 bolts. That was Hyper's recommendation at the time, because I didn't want to buy a manifold.
So what kind of pressure were you running? Boost? At that time?
Probably 180.
Okay.
That was 3 turbos. That was 180. Yeah. So then, in fact, I think Von Bauer built me a light steel manifold, but we even swelled that.
Okay.
Swelled that. Looked like it was pregnant. We had a hard time getting the bolts out. But yeah, we put that steel one on and then we put an end dump on it instead of in the middle. We put it on the end and then tapered it down, and that seemed to work really good.
That helped a lot. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of technology goes into the intake manifolds. I think a lot of them, at least at the single turbo classes, it's more about the intake than the exhaust. They're trying to funnel it in there and get each cylinder to get fed correctly. But
everybody told me they didn't like the end, but yet the big tractors were using the cast iron ones off of the truck motors that were the end, and that's why I went to the end, trying it.
So at that point, you knew 180 pounds was kind of your limit. What'd you do for a intake after that?
We built that steel one
then.
And then we put 4 turbos on, and I'll never forget, my gauge only went to 200 pounds, and it had a needle on it to tell where it went. And at Boone, I had a pretty good hook going, and it just goes, poof! And it was all over. It lifted the motor right off of the crankshaft. And Ed Dreesen come out in the pits. Of course, we had the hoods open, and it's lifted it up and just set it back down. I had cables on it, so it set it right back down. And Ed Dreesen got up on the steps, and he looked and he said, nobody need to run 200 pounds of boost. I'll never forget that.
Well, they're running quite a bit more than that these days.
Yeah, and I thought, so I don't know what actually we ran with that 4-charger.
So it just pegged out at 200, and of course there were no data loggers back then. You were just running mechanical gauges.
I pulled with, went down south one year, I can't even remember, it was in Tennessee. We pulled with Tom McConnell, I can't remember now what it was called. But,
did you ever pull with the Pfeiffer boys?
Oh yeah, Tom and Pat. No, they're the ones you should be interviewing, not me. They're long. They've been pulling longer than me, and they're still pulling, I think. So.
Well, their nephew is now, but yeah, they still got the
didn't the girl pull too?
She did pull that Alice back out and pull it again here, but I'll bet you it's been 5-6 years now that's happened, and maybe longer. But then they built a 1456, and that's what they run now. So it's changed a little, but so when
them guys they pulled a lot. the Ford brothers.
Yep.
There was, and you take Jack Simon and all them guys in that light super. Jim Eckenrod, my good buddy, we ran together a lot,
So when you were running that the 5500 class, it wasn't uncommon to run multiple classes for some of them. Did you run any other classes, or were you just that?
I only had one gear, so if the track was real loose, I thought maybe I could stand a chance. I pulled the 7 a few times, but very rarely. Plus, we didn't carry the weight. We had to borrow weight if we wanted to pull. I had the weight bracket with me all the time. We just put it in the center, and pull.
Because I think I remember seeing you pull 2 times in Kelowna.
I could have pulled.
It would have been late 80s, early 90s.
We pulled the 7 if we thought. Kelowna I always liked. That little bit of a downhill. People didn't realize
it
that.
Was.
And if you could get rolling there, I think I ran the 7 there.
Yeah.
Plus, we might have had the Allison there too at Kelowna, I think.
Yep, I remember seeing that one too.
Yeah, we had that at Kelowna a couple times.
Being a farm kid, the tractors always intrigued me a lot more than the modifieds. Yeah. But now that I'm getting more into pulling and interviewing some of these people, it's pretty incredible what they did with some of those modifieds. So when you started and rebuilt that tractor and got it on the track to begin with, they had 2 turbos on it. Did you go to 3 right away?
No, I think I ran 2 years. I think I ran. They had like a 6 and an 8 on it when I got it.
When you say a 6 and an 8,
T06 and a T08.
Okay.
I put an 8 on the bottom right away, and then I put a 74 on top.
And what brand were those?
All Air Research.
All Air Research, okay. Because today we're measuring the diameter in and out, and then until you get to super stock stuff, and they got a lot more leeway with what they do. But so you pulled what, 2 years with 2 turbos, and what was the deal? You just not as competitive as you wanted to be?
I always want to go faster.
So
we was doing good with the 2 chargers, and it was really, really reliable.
So with the 2 chargers, what pump did you run?
At that time, I ran a homemade P pump.
Okay.
That was all our own pump. I did take it up one time, and Midwest Diesel checked it, and we really wasn't getting the fuel out of it that I wanted. And I was running a set of Rob Russell used injectors. We took, I think the year I went to 3, I happened to be talking to Brett Berg, and I actually bought what they called a French or a Sigma pump from Brett Berg, and a set of good injectors, and it woke the tractor up. It was a 14 millimeter, which is small in today's world, but back then, that was a good sized pump for a 360 cubic inch motor,
But you didn't have any way to dyno that tractor?
Nope, never dynoed it, never.
Just trial and error down the tracks, what you got. And because did you have any guesstimation? Was there any formula you guys used to figure out what you maybe thought they had for horsepower?
No, we just, if we could win, we thought we had enough. So if we didn't, we tried to get some more power.
And then as far as like setting your fuel timing and things like that, were you running stock injector lines?
Oh, no.
You made your own, probably?
I had 105 lines on it, and I ran the first 2 years for
metal lines.
Yeah.
Okay, because we run stainless today anymore.
Well, no, they were stainless steel, but they 105s. I had first couple of years. I had a Vickers vane pump here that I used. And you'll laugh, but I used a sprayer pump, bypass valve off of a sprayer that you screw down to set my water pressure, and it worked good.
So you were injecting water back then already?
Oh, yeah.
But did you have a radiator and cooling system on it?
I took the radiator out, the water pump off. I had a little tiny radiator with electric fan on it, and an electric pump to circulate the water is all I had on it. So.
Okay, because today it's all dry block.
Yeah.
It's
and there was guys.
You were getting to that direction.
In fact, At Nebraska, one year, me and Braybex and 3 or 4 others got in a pull-off, and I had blew the soft plug out of it, and I didn't have any water in it. And Braybeck come over and says, "You can't pull that." And I said, "You just watch me." And I pulled down the track and won. So
yeah, well, I think the big thing was the heads, or what you had to watch. What did you run for an oil pan on that thing? Just a stock oil pan?
I had a aluminum pan on it, and I held 8-gallon oil in it.
Okay, so that's the big thing.
Yeah,
to keep
I had
the
a lot of oil.
Cool, and then if you can keep the head cool, you're fine. Because we're not putting any water through them anymore. We're cooling them with the water injection. So if you were injecting water.
Yeah, I was injecting water.
Did they test the water in the fuel back then?
They was starting to get on the fuel. Water, nobody ever checked water. I'll never forget I still had 2 turbos on, and we was out to Moleville, Iowa one night, and Larry Lundry comes over, and we was putting water in it, and he said, "Why don't you put a little of this in it?" So we poured about 1 gallon of alcohol in the water.
That's where I was going with it.
Guess what? About 200 feet, she locked up.
Oh, so it was a little too much alcohol.
A little too much alcohol. We locked her up solid.
I was going to say, because that's what I would imagine. I would have played with that. If they weren't testing it, we'd be...
We ran Hyper's water,
okay,
which had a little goat juice in it, I think, but because I could tell the difference between his water and the Napa stuff. So I always ran his, and I ran his cetane booster in the fuel. So.
Okay, so the diesel, you ran pump fuel and then just put cetane boosters in it.
Ran Hyper's cetane booster.
So do you have any idea? You never tested to see what you actually had for cetane?
No, but I cheated a little probably on how much he told me to use.
Well, I doubt you were.
But they were starting at the end there. They was going to start checking fuel, but I don't know. I think mine would have passed.
Yeah, so. I think I'm guessing most of them today. Yeah, they check that about every pass anymore. Oh, water and fuel. But when you went to 3 turbos, you stayed with the same. Well, you started to upgrade some manifolds, but really all the fabrication started ahead of the manifold and trying to piece these 3 turbos together, or 4. So how long you went from 2 to 3? Could you tell a big bump?
Oh yeah.
And then the pump. What'd you do for the pump?
Just opened the fuel up a little more, and then we changed the timing about 4 degrees when we went.
Advanced it?
Yeah, a little more.
Because you could move more air and probably cool it better.
And of course we had to give it a little more water then.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And so when you're injecting water, how were you doing that? Did you have jets?
I made my own. I put in between the turbos. There you go again. I just used sprayer nozzles, and then I'd made my own port injection and injected into the head running each valve too. So.
And they didn't get those sprayer, were they brass or what?
Yeah.
And they didn't get too hot?
No.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, now they machine them out and make special.
No, never had a bit of trouble with that.
No, that sounds like it.
My water system, one time, it didn't come on. Partly my own fault. Started out, I actually had to push a valve to put the water, turn the water on myself.
Wondering. So then later you went with a pressure switch, probably.
I bought, there you go again. I bought Rob Russell's wore out Hypermax valve, and I went the first time with that and melded the tractor. And then I figured out that it was junk, so I rebuilt it, and then never had any more trouble with it. But that come on, you could adjust that to come on, and I had it start coming on about 60 pounds. Because that little motor, you didn't want to put the fire out. So
right, no, you didn't want to.
I'd actually have fire starting to come out the stack before the water come on. So.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. So that was all a sprayer pump. Sprayer valving, jets.
Made it all myself.
Yeah, well, that's the way everything had to be back then.
Yeah,
nobody was manufacturing that stuff. Now you can buy water jets for $40 to $60 a piece, and
I tell everybody that
tap them in, and
we started, and I didn't have $20,000 in the truck, the trailer, and the tractor. You know,
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You had a lot of fun for.
And the first year I got the first year we just made a couple hooks, and we had some problems we had to get worked out. The second year we ran I think we went to like 18 or 20 pulls the second year. And there was 10 Grand National Light Supers. And we won Elkhorn that year. That would have been 88, I think. We won Elkhorn. There's 42 tractors there in the Light Super.
Okay.
And we won Elkhorn. We done real good, and then the following year, I might have had 3 turbos on them. I won Toma, and I won. I won Toma, and I think I won 2, but I got 4th on Grand National points the first year we ran Grand National. Now, you can believe it or not, but I had to pay income tax because the NTPA sent me a W-2 on the money I'd won, and we didn't have that many bills because we'd done it all ourselves. Right. And my tax man said, well, I don't know. So,
but $20,000 back then, just in perspective, gas was probably what, 30, 40 cents a gallon?
Maybe it was 50 at the most.
Yeah. So we're looking at today, you still probably had a $150,000 tractor.
Could, if you took dollar for dollar.
Compared it to inflation costs.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is you had a lot more time than we do because you had to build all these parts as well. So going to 3 turbos, it woke it up a lot, and you just fabricated all the ductwork.
Made all our own piping,
the pump. And then you ran that for what, about 2 years?
I can't remember, 2 or 3.
Because I remember you coming, Ernie did a good job, Ernie Ropp, just for the audience to know, and I'm from the Clone area, and that's where he was from, and he did a good job of promoting all these, famous pullers that were coming, and we remember hearing about the 666 with 4 turbos, and we thought it was crazy because I think you were even getting ahead of some of the bigger tractors on the number of turbos. I mean, some of them were going to 4, but a lot of them didn't have that. And so
everybody told me it wouldn't work.
Well, we were there to watch it blow up, and it didn't blow up, and it ran, phenomenal. But and you did that quite a while. So what when you plumbed in the 4 again, you just added water, and then what'd you do?
More water, and then by then I was just about max on the fuel I could get out of that pump. We had pumped pretty well open, and we was really pushing the timing. But I'll never forget, Hyper said, cut your water and your timing to where if you tear the head off after 10 passes, and if you're starting to burn the edges off, you're perfect, he said, of the cut pistons. We cut our own pistons, made our own pistons.
Yep.
And he said, if you're starting to burn the edges off, you're just perfect, he said.
Okay. And so how many, so you stayed with that pump though?
Yeah.
And then that pump's what you used, and you just upped the water. The interesting thing with all your engine parts, and I know you've told me this story before, but talk about that. You just you were an IH mechanic at one time, and then of course had your own repair shop, which we're sitting in today, but you had connections with some dealers, and that's where you were getting used parts.
Dealers, even the salvage yard at Wall Lake, they'd get a motor in, and I might get 3 or 4 decent pistons out of a motor. They'd save them for me. If a dealer overhauled a 766, and we had a lot of dealers back then.
Yes.
Now you got to drive 30, 40 miles.
Right.
But yeah, Stratford, Jewell, Grand Junction, all of them would save me. They'd call me up and say, hey, Kenny, we got a set of used pistons here. I'll save them for you. And so I scavenged every used piston I could find, but.
So the shape of them, you didn't mess with any of that? You just cut them down and decompressed
Cut them down, shined them up on the wire wheel and decompressed them. And we cut the hole, we cut an inch off of the bottom of the diesel piston. We cut an inch off.
Okay, took some off the skirt.
You took off the skirt, and so we could lighten the piston up. Everybody says, how do you get all them RPMs? And I said, well, we lighten the rods and we lighten the pistons, so.
What kind of RPM were you running back then?
If I couldn't get 6,500 on the line, I felt bad, so.
You were turning 6,500 RPM?
On the line.
Without a balance crank? And, I mean, you balanced it yourself, but... Oh my gosh!
Yeah. And then I had a tack on it. I did.
I don't doubt it.
Brett Berghill at one time made tacks that come right off where the regular tack.
Yep.
goes on a farm tractor, and he had one, and he said, can you just take it, He said, I tried to sell them and nobody wants to buy it, just take it. So, because they all wanted electric tacks. So I had a regular gear drive tack on it, went to 6,000, and I could peg it out before I left the line, so.
And then you'd, drop down to 45 or so?
If I was going down the track, I always, people laugh, but it still sounds like you're going fast, but 42 to 4,400 going down the track with my gear, I'd pull down because I was running road gear, so.
Right. Wild Horse Productions is a company dedicated to promoting rodeos with dirt in your face and heart-pounding action from start to finish. We promise to make our events an experience that will have you wanting to tell your friends about the time you had. Gage Bontrager Consulting is more than just a consulting firm. We're a team of experts committed to helping individuals and business through the complexities of their personal and professional development. We are dedicated to providing people the tools they need to learn, grow, and succeed, building a legacy of happy, healthy, and fulfilled lives. To learn more about us, you can find us at www.gagebontragerconsulting.com. Well, and the thing is, this is what I'm told, and it depends on your gear ratios. Of course, we're running now, like Atlas and Profab and all these companies who just cut out the transmissions and, you set in a 3 or a 5-speed, and they'll say 500 RPM is the equivalent of another gear. So whatever that's worth, a lot of them are running above direct right now, and, they're changing. But they can change that with the gearing and the transmission, and it's just straight cut gears, and it's a lot lighter and a more compact unit. And we can take all that weight out of the housing that way, so that helps a lot. Couple of the things that I guess I'm curious about, how often did you change oil or tear it down or do valves and all those things when you were running throughout the course of a year? Was it so many passes, or kind of when you started to feel like something was...
Oil, I was really good on oil because you'd get water in it because we was giving it a lot of water injection.
Right.
So 3 to 4 passes I would change the oil.
Okay. And we still do that today.
Yeah, I always believed the oil was the critical point of the thing. Far as running the valves wasn't too bad. It took a while, but the way I got my turbo setup was set up, I put a hook on them, and I could unhook the bottom of the turbo on the exhaust and the intake and lift the whole 4 turbos off in one chunk with the hoist.
So then it was really easy to get to.
I could get right to the valve cover.
Right.
And we only run 10 thousandths clearance on the tappets, so we had to stay on top of them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm still running 20 to 20.
We ran 10. I wanted them valves open as far as I could.
Right. No, absolutely. Camshaft then. What were you doing for a camshaft?
I ran the same camshaft the whole time. I had Iscadarian grind me a crankshaft in 1985.
Or a camshaft, you mean?
Cam, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a custom built.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I couldn't imagine you could get enough lift or get those valves open long enough for turbos.
Well, they took a stock cam and ground it.
Right,
and to look at it, you wouldn't even know how it would work.
Right.
It looked so goofy that.
Yeah. No, I could believe that. I was expecting that they had to do something with it. And the oil, what'd you run for oil back then?
I just ran 50 weight.
Straight 50 weight.
I got 50 weight oils, all I ran. So.
How many years did you run with 4 turbos?
I'm going to say 4.
Okay.
I'm going to say 4.
All right. And how...
Maybe 5, 4 or 5.
So you pulled that tractor for about 12 years, 10 years?
I bought it in 85. We didn't get it out till 86. We only made a couple hooks. 87, we hit it real hard. So, and around 2000 is when I tell you, I could see the writing on the wall that I was starting to where I didn't feel I was competitive. I guess I got it competitive in me. And I had a big decision to make if I wanted to switch to alcohol or just retire.
So alcohol was becoming a big deal.
Alcohol was coming out. You take between the Connors, Blackburn, Brent Long, and others. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but them guys was getting alcohol figured out, and even the diesels were in the heavy classes were whining,
right.
And they finally got their way and got a class for themselves.
Right.
But the light supers, they wouldn't separate them, you know.
Yep, and that's why they tried to adjust it still with weight and things. And
I just said I'm not going to switch to alcohol, and I do believe there's less work with alcohol than diesel. I really do. I think there's.
I think in the beginning it was a lot of, I'm not sure that was the case right away, but today they've really got the alcohol perfected.
That's what it was coming along, man.
They're consistent, where as a kid I remember seeing these things, and they could be, depending on weather, it could be, a little more finicky than a diesel tractor. Clutch-wise, what'd you run in for a clutch in that thing?
When I bought it, that was one of the first super stock tractors in Iowa. They had put a Crower in it.
Oh.
It had a Crower clutch in it.
Okay.
They put it in supposedly in 80 or 81.
Okay.
But when they was trying to run a stock input shaft, and it was all twisted when I got it.
Oh, really?
And I had, I took them discs, and we put our own rivets in.
How many discs were in it?
It was 3.
3 disc Crower, okay.
And I bought from Crower, I bought just the centers for 1 3/8 instead of 1 1/8 spline. And I had a local shop here make me an input shaft, and the first time I twisted the shaft off.
Even with the bigger shaft?
Yep. So I went back, they made me another one. 2 or 3 passes later, I couldn't shift it. It had twisted the splines. So I went back, they made me another one. And we're out to Hinton, one of my favorite Iowa pulls, and I can't get it in gear. It's twisted again. So I come back and I bite the bullet, and I don't know if you know him, but I called up Mike Sage. And I said something about a shaft. And I'll never forget his words. You send me that shaft, and if you twist that damn thing off in 5 years, I'll make you a new one for nothing, he says. And I put that shaft in, and we never had any more trouble with it.
So they made a new one here, but sent it to him, and he hardened it probably, is what he did.
He claimed he made a whole new shaft.
Oh, he made it. He just wanted that one for specs.
To go by, yeah.
And then he made another one, so he used.
I never twisted that off.
He didn't use regular stock steel. No. He did something different.
So when we built that 2-wheel drive, then I bought all Sage drive shafts for that, and we never had any trouble with it.
Right. Yeah.
That guy knew how to build shafts. He just.
So when you were doing that, though, at that point in time, though, everybody, even the super stock tractors, were still using ag rear ends. They weren't using 2.5-ton truck rear ends at that point. Okay. And when you
I don't know if you knew, in 2000, was that when I built the new tractor? 2000?
2001, yeah.
I built because I kept breaking that tractor in two, and I had a really good rear end.
Right.
I built one-piece frame, and I took the TA housing out. I put a 466 motor in it, put a clutch can on it. I actually got a variance from the MTPA to run that tractor. I got a variance from Outlaw to run that tractor. Before I got it on the track, evidently everybody got worried about that tractor, because all of a sudden I get a call from Mr. Richwine that says, we're not going to let you run that tractor. And I says, why? Well, somebody thinks you're going to have an unfair advantage because you're going to have the big motor in it.
Well, the 400 series motor, were there rules on the cubic inches?
No, 505.
No rules on the cubes back then?
No, 505.
Oh, 505 on a 5500?
Yeah. And
well, then you were in spec.
Well, but they claimed it wasn't the right motor for that rear end.
Oh.
And at first they give me a variance to run it, and then then Outlaw follows suit.
Right.
And I said, okay, you don't want the damn tractor? I'll just sell it. I'll get out. And I said, you don't need the two-wheel drive either. So sold it too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you had a truck at the same time?
Yeah, well, we had after the Allison, then we built that two-wheel drive pulling truck. And
right.
we won a lot with that.
Yep, I remember that. So, what happened to that tractor then? Did somebody take it, go out east, or?
No, I can't remember how much that guy bought.
He bought the rear end.
He bought the rear end, I had the roll cage, all
The sheet metal too, I believe. The top of it, the top sheet.
hoods,
Went to Minnesota.
Right. Okay.
but he didn't buy the motor, did he? No.
Not, because you have the motor in it.
I think he bought the pump and
You didn't take the turbos. The turbos are still.
he bought the pump and the rolling chassis and wheels and tires and
And
stuff.
you still have the turbos?
I had them up until about a year ago.
Did you?
Mr. Eckenrod bought them.
Did he really?
Yeah. I don't know what he's going to do with them. He come here one day and
that's a piece of history. That's
I wish I'd have took pictures of that. People look at that and say, how in the hell does that work?
Yeah. No. Well, maybe if he's got it.
I'll bet they're still sitting there.
I'll need to get get his information from you and see if I can track that down. So
I'll bet they're sitting there, yeah.
So
he was putting 2 Chargers on a Chevy pickup, diesel pickup. He was going to put 2 Chargers on. He bought all my turbo stuff.
What was the number of pulls, hooks you did a year?
Depends if it was working good or not. So.
Okay. But on an average year, you 15, 25?
Oh, I don't think I ever went to 25. And then are you talking winter pulling too? Now, see, in the winter, we took that, I won more with that Allison in the winter pulls because that thing had a gear in it that was just perfect for short indoor tracks.
Okay.
We run that indoor 4 years. In the wintertime, we went to several indoor pulls.
So you ran the 666 and the Allison at the same time.
And then the Allison, he's got the block. I was spinning that 4800, which is too fast for an Allison, and I broke a wrist pin in it, and it mowed the motor completely in two. The rod just kept swinging around.
Right.
Happened at Sedalia, Missouri on an indoor pull. And
interesting. And then after that, that's when you went to the two-wheel drive.
Then we built the two-wheel drive. Were just starting to come out in Iowa, and I could see that was going to be a good class to get in. So then we built that two-wheel drive. There you go again. I bought.
And you pulled that one the same time you were pulling the 666 as well.
Yep.
Okay. So when did you load everything on one trailer?
Oh, we had 2 trucks and 2 trailers.
Okay.
My son usually drove one, or somebody did. I had
Right.
an old fella too that's passed away helped me quite a bit, and he'd drive. And
so what'd you have in the modified then, the two-wheel drive, for a motor?
well, there you go again. Don't ever buy somebody else's junk. So I bought a 572 Rodeck.
Okay.
First pass at the Unidome. Pull up the Unidome. I blew a head gasket. So we pulled it apart.
So you didn't tear it down before you took it to the track?
Well, it was supposed to have been all gone through.
Oh,
so
I got you.
fresh.
I hear stories like that today.
Yeah. Went clear to Nebraska to get it, and it's supposed to be all fresh and ready to go. Well, we blew his head gasket, so we tore it down, and of course it had cracked the block, so we was going to have to, I thought I could just weld the block and do it myself, but no, my kid, he said, you better tear it down, let's deck it and do it right. So, well, when we got it back together, you couldn't torque the mains. It was a real early Rodeck, and we was pulling the studs out of the mains.
Oh my
So we helicoiled it, put it all together, went to Hinton,
I'll let you know.
and I blew it out the gate in the two-wheel drive and won that. And then I put her in the open, and I blew it out the gate and won the open. And we're back at the trailer, and they come back and they said, they announced me as the winner. And then they come back and said, well, you're disqualified. I said, well, you lost an exhaust pipe, which I understand. But the whole class had pulled, and I'm already loaded up, and then they tell me I'm
That
disqualified.
much later. So, because you lost a part on the track.
Yeah.
So that was, I mean, today it's the same way. You lose equipment, you're DQ'd. But
I didn't have a problem with that, but I wish they'd have seen when it fell off.
you should have called it right there.
Well, it has saved that motor, because what I'm leading up to is I shook the crankshaft completely out of the bottom of that truck.
Oh my goodness.
That block was ruined.
Oh boy.
2 passes ruined it.
Oh no. So what did you, so did you start to girdle them then, or what was how'd you?
No, then I went to Chevy Marine block, 4-bolt main block.
And then that
saved, and I still ran. We ran 572 cubes in that.
Okay. And then were you running alcohol or gas?
Oh yeah.
You're running alcohol.
1471 blower.
Yeah.
It worked good. At first it was really competitive with anybody, but it's like everything else. In the later years, we couldn't keep up with that.
Right.
They was running high helix, 18, everything you could think of,
Right.
And we was running just Chevy heads, and they're running all Hemi stuff.
Right.
So we finally quit that too. But
Yeah. So the
innovation's all gone.
there's some out there yet, but it's a total different deal. It's not like it was when it was for you when you were here. I mean, you could build a lot of your own stuff. What I have the ability to build and what most guys would in their shop wouldn't come close to, you got to have now CNC machines, and they're making billet parts, and things are just different. At the same time, we can run a motor supposedly 30, 35 passes, and you don't need to worry about bearings and things like that in them, but the cranks are balanced and what have you. So I know they've changed some of that stuff. Out of those dozen years that you ran that 666, how many years did you win a points championship?
I can't remember, 1 or 2, and I got second the year that the light supers got into the Indy Super Pole. I got second that year. I know. I can't remember what year. That was 95 maybe.
Because it was always a strong running tractor, regardless of the turbos.
The biggest problem was it's like Iowa. I'm not saying I could win Iowa, but I never ran all the Iowa polls to win a championship. When I first made up my mind I was going to have a big tractor, my dream was to run Grand National NTPA. In the early 70s, I started going to polls. I went to Louisville, and I think in 76, and I don't think I missed a year. I went clear to Colorado when they had them indoors out there, the NTPA. I just went to the Indy Super Pole several years. Went to Louisville for years, Indy Super Pole. My dream was when I built that tractor, I wanted to run Grand National.
Right.
And I got a lot of heat from doing that.
Yeah.
But there was.
Well, I don't know what the dynamics were back then. Today, Grand National's still the big thing. I don't run that. I don't have the budget for that. I think when I compare what you spent to build the tractor now to where we're at, when you go travel and do the NTPA, you're talking yet another level of cost, and it's escalated a lot. I went to. The guy that won the just for an example, the guy that won the super stock class this year went through 9 motors. So, and I think from what I hear, they were running north of 400 psi for the boost.
We talking about Ross's?
Yeah.
3 passes that motor shot.
Yeah, so, that's, and now it doesn't sound like they're going to run next year very much. They just wanted to go 1 year and win it all, and they did.
Well, I heard they was going to try to...
Maybe go to a different class?
Well, I heard they was going to try to cut it back and get a little more reliability out of it.
Yeah, and that could be.
3 passes, that's a lot of money in 3 passes.
If it goes to that, then we're getting into the NHRA level stuff, and where you're rebuilding every pole, and that's not, nobody can afford that.
Well, where's it going to stop and start?
Right, and then you're getting into the sponsorships, and I don't think at this point, tractor pulling is still a very grassroots, some farm kid like me can actually go do it. And, there's guys that are pulling, with the speed limit classes that are very affordable. They might be putting different injectors and a pump on it, but they're pretty well stock, and they might have to have some wheelie bars, but they're really entry level.
I wish they had classes like back when I was pulling, but
that's changed a lot tremendously over the years. But so you did a lot of the indoor pulls. So when NTPA, I'm trying to understand, today that's the national series, and they have, I think, a few pools in Iowa, 2 at least, I think, but they kind of hit their certain, like Toma. I know they're in Illinois again every year. I think Nashville, Illinois, I believe, or no, I can't.
Maybe Sandwich,
Illinois. So I know they still hit some of those that were their big pools, and I know they're working on maybe being associated with some of the smaller associations. But it's really changed on how the dynamics of, Outlaws are more the Western series, and you got the PPL, and then we've got Excalibur in northern Missouri, ECI in eastern Iowa.
They've come a long way, that ECI.
Yeah, Badger State seems to have a really good...
Badger State's got a big following.
They've got a really good group there. And then you get out east, there's even some more of them out there. Illinois has, but there's a lot more regional series is what I'm seeing. Was that the case back then too, or was it more brush pulls? Because I'm learning there also were a lot of brush pulls where just some promoter would go put on a pull in his town every year.
I didn't go to any.
Okay.
Other than the NTPA, the only thing I did go was the forerunner of the Outlaws years ago, before Iowa and them went with Outlaw. I used to run some Outlaw pulls.
Okay.
And I ran the Darnells, which had the main attraction winter indoor pulls.
Okay.
And I ran USA, which had in Vets Auditorium.
Really?
And Ames. I ran them with the indoor pulls with the Allison and the two-wheel drive.
So they did more outdoor pulls.
No, indoor.
Or indoor pulls back in the day than they do today.
Oh, shit, 10 times more.
Yeah, I see. So you could pull in the wintertime.
I could go anytime I wanted in the wintertime about.
No, we've got very few.
There's no hardly nothing indoors anymore. I think insurance maybe stopped a lot of that. I don't know. Cost?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the cost.
I know Neil Darnell told me once that, because I asked him why he quit having to pull at the Unidome.
Right.
And he told me, he says, I can rent Madison Square Garden cheaper than I can rent the Unidome, he said.
Well, he had to haul all that dirt in, had to haul it all back out.
And see, they made a pretty long track. I don't know if you ever went there.
No.
But they made, so you could get a 300-foot track in there.
Okay.
And he usually made like a 260 or 270-foot track.
Okay.
Where a lot of them indoor tracks, maybe 200, 220 feet was it. Well, you go to Louisville, you got to get in the sand pile to get 240 feet.
Right. And I've never pulled on a short track, and they don't re-pull like they did. 300 feet was the whole time you pulled. 300 feet was considered a full pull. They was just starting to do the go as far as you can. Okay. But no, I pulled. I'm different than everybody else. I enjoyed the pull-offs. Well, we did too, as the spectators.
Yeah, I loved. I thought the damn thing won't make a second pass. We're going to find out.
So
I know the Piper boys always say they like to get me in a pull-off so they could try to melt me down.
So when you, when you did a lot of those pull-offs, you weren't worried about the motor getting too hot or anything like that too often. Okay.
See, the whole time, if I had to wait for pull-off, I had the electric fan going with.
So you were cooling
the water.
Down. Yeah, you were cooling your head.
And it was circulating the whole time while it was sitting there. So.
And then, how many times in a year? You pretty well could put the motor together and keep the crank and the bearings in it once you got the crank figured out.
Pretty much
for the year. And then you just because now a lot of guys in the winter go through them and they'll, do the maintenance work.
Oh, we tear it down in the winter.
Okay. And get ready for the winter pulls and then go on back into the summer.
The second time we won Toma, we had the tractor tore down here, and we was going to leave for Toma at 6 o'clock the next morning. And we backed it out at midnight to start it, and it goes, locked up. And what? So we get out, and we can turn the motor, but we can't turn it a complete revolution. And I said to this guy, help me, I said, did you take the rags out of the intake? What rags? We pulled the intake off, and here there's rags wrapped around the intake valve and down in the piston. And he says, now what are we gonna do? I said, give me that oil can. I put some gas in it, and I squirted gas in those 3 cylinders where the rags were, threw a match in there.
Cloth rags? Cloth rags,
yeah, burned them off, turned the motor over. I said, let's back her out and stand back. She ran like a watch. We put her together and went to Toma and won the next day.
Those are great stories.
Yeah, he left the rags in her.
Just burned them right out.
Yeah, I burned them out with gas.
Oh my gosh. Any other stories like that?
I got a lot of stories, but I can't remember. I'm getting too old.
Anything you ever had happen at the track that you could kind of patch together and make a pass?
I don't know. I can't
think of that too much. So let's jump back. NTPA was the big, they're still the big series around. When you started pulling, how long had they been in existence?
Well, I actually bought my first license in '86, and I got puller magazines, I think, clear back to maybe 70 or so.
Okay, so they were a fairly new series yet, though, at that point.
I'm going to guess in the late 60s is when the NTPA was formed.
They formed.
I went to the year that they went broke, NTPA went broke, and I went to because I got 4th place in the points that year, but I'd also had 2 of the Pepsi keys to open up a new pickup.
Okay.
If you won a Grand National that year, there was a promotion that you got a key to open this Colorado pickup. And I got 2, but that didn't compete with Tim Engler's 30s. He had 30 keys. I only had 2. But I didn't win. Engler won the truck.
Well,
he had 30-some keys.
He won a lot that year.
But yeah, when you had 4 classes, see, at that time it was 5, 7, 9, and 12. And he was running all 4 classes with that tractor.
Really?
Yeah.
He was at 50. He was pulling in the
5 with 2 motors. They'd had 4 and then 5. So.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. But that was a modified?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember.
That's when he was running the Aries. Then the next year he put on 6 Chevrolets.
Because he had that thing to where he could at the track add a motor.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
I remember that. I
had 2 motors.
I totally forgot that, but he could slide more motors in and just probably had them quick couple.
Didn't take them
right.
half an hour and they could have it running. So.
Right. Interesting. No.
The second motors were all self-contained with oil and the fuel right on them, so they just had to mount the motors. So.
Set it in there, throw some bolts in it, and away he's ready to go again, and a lot more horsepower.
You know,
That's interesting. What are some of your best memories out of the whole experience, out of the years you did tractor pulling?
Just the people. And maybe the smaller organizations are better, but I went to, it's probably been 5 years ago now, or maybe even longer. Jim Eckenrod had a Grand National for probably 5 years up there.
Yep.
And I went up to that every year. And the camaraderie I don't think it's the same. When I was there, Gardner Stone would come over, and Ernie Ropp. Just because you had a light super, that didn't mean you didn't fit in.
Right,
you was still one of the gang, and Kenny, stop over to the trailer. We'll have food after a while. Well, Gardner Stone, we're gonna have food after a while. Be sure and come over. When I went to, they pulled the tractors, they put them in, they locked the doors, and you could shoot a gun through the pits half an hour after the pull was over, not hit anybody.
Right.
I don't think it's the same.
Yeah. There's, of course, I've never participated in an indoor pull. I'm going to this winter, but I know it's very different than what it was because of the engineering and the things that you guys were doing yourselves. were there a lot of secrets? I mean, were people trying to hide things, or if somebody called you? Because I was told
I tried to help a lot of people.
Because I was told there was a similar tractor to yours in Missouri, and I can't say the name of it. I just had somebody reach out through social media and tell me about that. That was a pretty competitive tractor, and I don't know, I don't know who it was, but because of the things you were building, I mean, it would seem to me.
Gas or alcohol?
Oh, I think it was a diesel. I think it was a 686, he said, or a 666.
Because Brent Long had a strong 686 back
That would have been it.
That was strong.
Okay. I think that's the name as I recall.
Yes, I don't know.
You didn't help a lot then.
No, hell, he helped me.
Okay.
That was alcohol, and it was, I don't know as I can ever say I beat him. So that was a strong tractor. But that was the beginning of me realizing that the diesels weren't going to keep up.
Okay. So, and now they adjust that with weight to try to balance that out. But I was just curious because today, you build a tractor and it's good. Nobody wants to help anybody with anything, with air pressure, with, they're all watching, snooping around, looking at the tires, and
I know they hide their weights in weight boxes, and
oh yeah, they do all of that. And my thing is,
I've hung my weights on there, and they could count them, and
and the chassis when I got it had covers for all the weights, so you couldn't even see how many there were, and I don't want to mess with that. The fact of the matter is, mine's not going to weigh the same as any other in the class when it's sitting there without any weight anyway. And all these companies are building chassis, they're going to hook up different. I don't think it matters where if they know where my weights are, I don't think changes a darn thing. But that's just me. I'm wanting to have a good time,
You'd see and there's good friends, but Braybecks had their book.
Yep.
How many weights, and then they'd say, Kenny ran this many weights here, this many. So the following year, if they see me pull, if I changed my weights and they watched me pull, but that's what they done everybody done one. I mean, I didn't do it. I said, if it ain't up here, it don't matter,
Well, I make notes for my own things because I'm old enough now, my memory's not what it once was, and I don't remember and it might even be some different things as far as, I'll jot down even when I changed oil because I won't remember when I did it, It's just things like that, kind of just keeping some notes. But the biggest thing on the weight side, and they told me this, you probably didn't move weight a lot. I mean, front to back, or did you have to back then?
Very seldom. That 6, if you got too light on the front, you was going to have a wild ride.
Okay.
Seemed like. I probably ran more to be safe than I needed to, but that tractor, if it took off and picked the front end about that high, if I could carry it all the way down the track, I was going to get a good pull.
Right. So
but if it started bouncing or if it got way high, I hit the wheelie bars a few times. And
yeah, well, that's always a bad deal when you hit the wheelie bars because it'll start to upset and unload your back tires, and maybe it didn't affect it that much back then, but it seems to today. You did not probably run a narrow front at that time.
No, I always had a wide front.
And then, did you always have a roll cage?
No.
And fenders probably not either.
I had to have fenders.
You did have to have fenders by the time you came along, okay.
I had to have fenders. You had to have, the first year I pulled in, I think 85 or 86, I only made a couple pulls. All you had to have was a helmet.
Okay.
The following year you had to have a fire suit. And the following year you had to have gloves and shoes. The last year, when I built this new tractor, you had to have a cage. They'd come out and said you had to have a cage. I had taken my cage to Des Moines. Richwine was there because they had a garden tractor pull, and his son pulled a Cub Cadet called a Jet Cadet. It had a little jet motor in a Cub Cadet, but he certified my cage. Well, then they told me I couldn't run it. So yeah, I never got to pull with the cage. So.
Okay, and then as far as your seats, I mean, you just built your own pedestal?
My seat was built right into my fenders. It was all aluminum.
Okay.
So I just sat on the aluminum.
Okay, interesting. Because I knew at one point there was a puller had lost his life with seat breaking, and I didn't know.
Happened right down
Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
I've got my older brother was there and seen it happen. That was a tragedy.
Yeah. Seat broke and he fell off.
Yeah, took him under the tire. So I didn't know if that was part of what started with the.
That started the fenders.
And then.
That started the fenders. Seats, nobody ever really.
They still let the seats alone.
Yeah, at that time, once you had fenders, they figured you weren't going to fall off. But
yeah,
I could lift with 4 bolts. I could take my fenders and seat right off. So.
And were those aluminum or
yeah,
they
all
were,
aluminum.
Everything was. So who was building that stuff for you back then?
Actually, Todd Prowley built me the seat and fenders.
Okay.
And my shifting deck was all out of aluminum.
Oh, really?
Built that all out of aluminum.
Saved a lot of weight there.
Oh, yeah, a bunch.
Tremendously.
But that's when we were scared then it was going to break in two, because even the differential where the counter shafts are, that's where Larry Lunder's tractor broke in two, was right at the counter shafts.
Okay.
So that's when we put tie bars from the rear end final drives clear up past the bell housing on the frame.
Okay. And then your sheet metal for your hood, did you use factory hood?
All aluminum.
That was all aluminum too?
Made that ourselves. It was
Really?
kind of crude, but
okay.
We made it.
That's what I'm hearing from different pullers back then. A lot of them made their own. I mean, today there's a couple different places that make.
Hey, it's a show anymore.
Yeah, and it gets.
Back then it was tractor pulling. Run what you brung.
But there's still guys that are doing a lot of their own fab work, and my tractor still has the factory metal hoods, and of course we made side panels for it, but that's a little easier to do. What were some other things as far as the front end then? You didn't run anything factory there. That was probably did you have a rack and pinion steering or?
When I bought that tractor, I made up my mind that I'd seen too many tractors break the front ends.
Right.
And you couldn't touch it today, but Doug Drussel built me a front end, less the wheels, with just a regular steering box on it, and he built that for me for $1,300. I think he needed money because that was the last front end they built. So,
really?
yeah. And the shop burnt down. So
$1,300 is still a pretty good chunk of change back then.
Well, that was the best $1,300 I ever spent.
Yeah.
Never had no trouble with the front end at all. So.
What about tires? What were you running for tires back then? Just pressed?
The back?
Yeah, on the back.
When I bought it, that was the only thing one of the things I salvaged. It had aluminum wheels, and it did have 24 or 30.5s on it when I bought it.
Okay.
We took them. Actually, a friend of mine drove clear out and had Bob Parks cut them for me. So, and when I showed up at the first pull, everybody said that won't work.
So Parks has been involved in the tire game for a lot of years.
Because I only had that much bar on them, and when I got them back, I called Parks and I said.
But they were single cut yet.
Yeah, I said, "Are you kidding me?" Oh, I said, "Kenny, it'll work. It takes less power. You'll be surprised. You're going to thank me for cutting them that close." Yep. Well, we went to the first pull, and I didn't do very good. And we got to looking, and where he had cut them, we could lay a straight edge on this one and on this one, but it'd rub in the middle. We was running on the ball part of the tire. And I called him and I said, "Bob, we're running on the flat part of the tire instead of the bar." So he said, "Well, lay a bar." I said, "We did. We laid a bar on it." So then we ground the centers out, and then that tractor worked.
Then it woke up. So he had just not taken enough out there. What brand were they? Did it matter?
Firestone.
Firestone.
Yeah.
And then you just stayed with whatever tread pattern they had.
In the later years, we went in and double cut them.
You did then.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you're running about a 1/4-inch bar, probably.
Well, maybe I think 3/8.
3/8 on that. Yeah. And that's evolved tremendously. Parks is still in the tire game. I guess. Is it the same parks?
Should be.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
You ever been there?
No, but I've got a set of parks on the back of my tractor.
I've been to his shop
And they're good.
twice.
They're good tires.
I've been there twice. You can eat off the floor.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
It's all varnished hardwood floor in that shop.
Oh, you're
it's
kidding
neat.
me.
Yeah. I've been there twice.
No, he's been through some ups and downs. He developed some tires, and I don't know what happened, but now he's come back in and he's developed another set, and they're good tires. He's very smart.
He done me good over the years. What little we used him. I had that Allison, and it had a set of 30.5 Firestones on it, and we was going to pull at Ames indoors. And I'd sent him out there to cut. I said, because they was just ragged. I said, and he called me up about a week before, and he said, say, Kenny, I got some bad news. I said, what's that? He said, and they was 2-plies.
Right.
He said, I cut into that one, he said, and I ruined it. The cutter got away from me. I said, so what's that mean? Well, he says, you're screwed.
Oh, no.
I said, come on, Bob. Well, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. And he did. He made me a deal at that time on tires. He said, I've got a new set here. He said, I'll cut them. And he said, I think I can get $1,500 out of your other tire. It's a good tire. He said, I'll take that off. And he says, I'll knock $1,000 off for ruining your other tire. So I got a set of them tires for $2,000, and already cut and ready to go on. Nice tires.
And that would have been what, late 80s? Probably.
Yeah,
90s,
yeah,
somewhere in there.
Yeah, because I went to a sale in Davenport, and this modified was owned by J.B. Petzel. I don't know if you know the name. If you look in the old pullers, he pulled this Allison.
Okay.
It was just on gas. Had a carburetor on it, and we're standing there, and the guy kept pointing to me, and I wasn't bidding.
Right.
And Dennis Goodwin and them guys was standing behind me, and they was raising their hands, see, like it was me bidding. And the guy says, you got it. And I said, got what? $4,500. See, and I thought, well, hell, maybe I'll just take it home. So then Petzel comes over and he says, I can't let that tractor go for that. He said, I told him I had to have at least $5,000. And I said, well, then I guess you own it, you know. So, and we'd brought a trailer along. And
so you were wanting to buy this?
No, I wouldn't buy it. I just brought the trailer along. If there was a stealer, I was going to buy it. Pretty soon he comes over and he says, make out the check. He said, $4,500, you own it, you know.
So he was ready to quit.
So we brought it home, and then we converted it to, I bought from Malum's, I think was the name. I bought the fuel injection.
So that's what got you into the modified.
Bought the fuel injection. But anyway, then I completely rebuilt that chassis. Didn't spend a lot on it, but we rebuilt it. Anyway, I sent these tires out, and so then he calls me the night before Hilton, and he said, I got your tires ready. And I didn't even give him a chance. I just said, you throw them in your pickup, and I'll meet you at Galesburg, Illinois. And hung up on him. And he was there. He was there.
And you went to Galesburg, picked him up, brought it back, and we got her ready to go.
Pulled Hilton that next night, and I got a little squirrely, so I shut it down. And then the second night, I got second, and the guy that beat me was the guy from Illinois with the Packers, Rush.
Oh, yes.
Darren Rush.
Really?
Yeah, he's the one that beat me.
Gotcha.
2 inches.
That's where I got my clutch.
Yeah.
He's the largest, what are they, Crower?
They're largest Crower. They're really good. And they build a lot of their own clutches,
they do.
too.
He did a tremendous job.
They're really good on
flywheel
clutches.
and everything. So he's a wonderful human being.
Yeah, they're really good on clutches. But, yeah, he beat me. But yeah, I loved indoor pulling with that Allison.
Yeah.
It was wasn't geared worth a damn for outside. It just, you got to wing it too fast.
So back though, when you were pulling the 666 indoors, they were using smoke tubes and sucking out the air or the smoke back then and doing all those things. Anything else unique that you guys did with that tractor, the 666, that you can think of? I mean, I feel like we've covered it front to back on a lot of the setup things that you did with it?
Just, we made her, if we couldn't, we tried to make it all ourselves pretty much, so.
Well, you were certainly a hero of mine when I was a kid, and we always loved to see you pull last because we like to see the other colors go, make their passes, and then we were diehard red guys growing up, and then here you'd hook up and just sail right on by a lot of times when you had those four turbos.
I remember the year at Kelowna, probably the last year Connors ran that John Deere in the light super.
Okay.
And he's right. Ernie Connor come over to me and he says, I got twice as much horsepower as you do. And I said, yes, Ernie, you do. And he said, I got to run a 12-inch drawbar because he says I can't control it. And he said, Kenny, you'll beat me. I could beat him 8 out of 10 times because he couldn't get the power to the ground. Now on the 7, there ain't no way I could ever keep up with him. But in that light class, he had to run such a low drawbar.
So what were you running for a drawbar?
20-inch. I run 20-inch all the time.
And it was a custom-made hitch?
Yeah.
Okay, so you built that yourself probably?
Well, Bauer built the hitch
did. And so they were adjustable?
It was an Engler-style hitch.
Okay. So. That's interesting because, I was
the first one in the light super to do that. So
really?
Put an Engler-style hitch on.
You were an innovator back then.
Well, when I went to to Elkhorn that year, I'm not kidding you, there was a couple live super guys that still had a clevis. Yeah, a clevis to hook on, or a thin drawbar that you knew was going to bend down and lose an inch or two of drawbar.
Right.
I had the bolts right on the back. I'm sure yours is probably the same way. That's
it's sucked up tight.
Yeah.
So there weren't any rules on the length back then?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so they just slid it in and shortened it up, but it was still just a factory drawbar.
No. Mine.
No, yours was.
Oh, yeah. Some of them other guys
were. Clevis. They didn't have the.
Yeah, I just had a clevis on a couple of them.
Wow, that's.
And then a couple of them just had there was the right length, but there was just a light drawbar. I looked at that and I thought, the weight of them sleds, that's got to bend down a little.
Yeah, no kidding.
I wanted every bit I could get. So.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to thank you for letting me come up and interrupt your day. I've been looking forward to this tremendously. I know you didn't want to brag, and I want the audience to know that. And I want you to know there's nothing about this that was arrogant in any way. But if we don't tell these stories, people don't know where it all came from. And the older I get, the more I realize that's the case, because I lost my dad when I was 15, and if I don't share what I learned from him to my kids, they don't even know who their grandpa is. And we're really just a generation away from losing so much history. So it's interesting when I'm out there at the track and I'm pulling and how things are done today, and I'm in my shop working. One, I want to thank you for giving me a side panel off that tractor because it's hanging on my wall, and if you get on some of my social media, you'll see it and you'll see me talk about it once in a while. But the things you did changed the sport where it's at today. You were very innovative, and
did I give you a trophy?
Yep, I've got a trophy, and I've also got a picture of you that you framed and signed for me. So. And I'll show those.
I thought I gave you a trophy.
Yeah, I'll show those. I really
500 trophies.
I appreciate it, and
I've won 5 between all the things I've pulled over the years. I have 500 trophies.
So to wrap that up real quick, you did some micro minis. You told me, which was a little RC cars, basically, or tractors, and then you did mini rods.
No, garden
tractors, and then from garden tractors,
antiques.
You got into antiques, then the 680 or 666,
and then the Allison,
and then the modified. So you've left your mark on the sport of pulling, and I know a lot of people remember you. I can bring your name up just about anywhere, and everybody knows the 666. They might not remember all the others, but they remember that tractor. So with that, I want to thank you for watching another episode of Breaking Barriers podcast. Please subscribe on whatever channel it is that you like to watch these so you can get notifications. If you have other pullers and heroes in your hit pass that you would like for us to interview, please reach out and we will try to make that happen. Have a great day.
Breaking Barriers.